Hello, everyone. This is Kirk Schroder. I'm an entertainment attorney here in DC and in Virginia. And I want to welcome you to another edition of Brief Encounters. And today, our topic is a conversation with a game industry lawyer. As everyone knows, the game industry is just growing by leaps and bounds. And I am super excited to have my longtime friend and colleague, Seth Steinberg, who is a principal of digital arts law in San Francisco. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him in just a moment. But Seth, hello, finally.
Hi, Kirk. Hello. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we finally get a chance to catch up. Seth and I go back a long way. I used to chair the American Bar Association Entertainment and Sports Law section. Seth is still active in that, but he's been active there for quite some time. I believe you chair this sort of the gaming and
The official title is the Electronic Gaming and Esports Division.
But Seth has done a lot more than that. In my opinion, he's really one of the foremost experts, and as far as experts go in the legal field in the gaming industry. I guess one of his big stints was at LucasArts, which is a Lucas film company. And then he was also legal counsel for Sony Computer Entertainment and all in the gaming work. He's been a super lawyer in Northern California and is an outside counsel to many of the gaming industry top giants, as well as I will just tell you that he's a frequent lecturer in the legal circuit on the game industry. There is a lot more I could tell you about his background, but I'm just going to tell you right now that if you're listening in, you're listening to really one of the top gaming attorneys in the country, as well as a very good friend and colleague. Seth, let me just ask you real quick for our audience. Describe the gaming industry. I mean, I'm an entertainment lawyer. I can talk about film, TV, publishing, things like that. But how do you define the gaming industry?
Yeah, and thanks again, Kirk. Great to be here. The video game industry is comprised of a lot of parts, and it's as much entertainment as it is technology. And on entertainment, it really involves all aspects of entertainment: film, music, sports, etc. Traditionally, video games were played either through gaming consoles, so PlayStation, Xbox, today Nintendo Switch, or through a personal computer. Mobile gaming now has taken off. It's probably one of the leading ways that people play their games. There's online worlds that then you can make and play other people's games, like Roblox, which is huge. Fortnite has grown because of that as well. So when you say video games, it really comprises almost any form of interactive entertainment.
Got it. I think I saw a stat not too long ago where if you take the film industry, the music industry, literary publishing, theater, just about anything else that we call typical entertainment, I think the video game industry is like a multiple times in size than what we think of traditional entertainment. Is that pretty much true? I mean, the video game industry is like really one of the largest entertainment markets.
Yeah, I mean, it quietly makes quite a bit of money for the companies that are involved, although it's also an expensive industry to be in. I have one stat up right now from a company, Statista, that projects almost $250 billion for 2023 in the video game market worldwide. And, with games as a service and mobile phones, a lot of that money is spent after you've acquired the game. Some games are free, the free to play model. The money you pay for this has been in the news for lawyers in terms of, Epic's lawsuit with Google, Epic's lawsuit last year with Apple, and some state settlements because of how much money's involved actually once you're playing the game from in-app purchases and in-game purchases.
So, like in the film world, you have like the major Hollywood studios. In the publishing world, which I'm very familiar with, you have five major publishing houses, the big five. Is there something similar to that in the gaming industry? Is there like a big number or big whatever that are the big players, kind of like the big Hollywood studios or?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, and I use that word traditionally because in the last 10 years with the growth of mobile, there's a lot of things changing. But on traditional gaming, when the typical person is thinking, oh, I'm going to go and spend $60 and download Call of Duty. That's part of traditional gaming. And you have your console manufacturers, you have your publishers, and you have your developers. The publishers are more akin to the studios, as are the console manufacturers. So by console manufacturers, Sony makes PlayStation, Microsoft makes Xbox, Nintendo makes Switch, and before that, Wii and a number of other devices. They make the hardware and then they also make the software for it. By publisher, those are really the companies that control the games that come to market. So they may make them themselves, they may hire outside companies to make the games for them, but they're really the ones getting ready to bring to market. That includes marketing and advertising, that includes distribution, both domestically and worldwide, and ultimately making the game accessible to the consumer.
Is the publisher a middleman, and so to speak, in this instance?
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, again, traditionally, when this was a retail focused industry, you would have companies, independent publishers like Electronic Arts or Activision. Let's use EA as an example. EA makes Madden football, right? So they will develop that internally with people who work for them, employees of EA. They will get that game done every year. They will get it to market. When it used to be retail, they would have to work under license from the console manufacturer. So to use PlayStation as an example, they would need a license to have that compatible with the PlayStation console. Today it's PlayStation 5. And then they would press the discs, usually using authorized facilities per that license agreement. And then they, though, would be the ones to send that out to the various retail outlets, Target, Best Buy, GameStop, etc.
And just to give our audience a reference, so I guess unlike today in the film market, I'm using that right now as an example, or even in publishing and music, people self-publish, they self-distribute. Is that a phenomenon in the game industry, or do you still need that publisher to do the licenses for the platforms and all the other different things?
No, I mean, as the industries move to mobile, as the app stores, when I say stores, Google Play and Apple's App Store have grown immensely, you can go on there and find games that are made by people like you and me and by large companies. So certainly that's opened up the industry to self-publishing, we can call it that. You can also self-publish on PC. You never needed a license for that. Unlike the consoles, you can make a PC game, it just goes out. It's got to be compatible, whether with the latest Windows or iOS systems. So you do have self-publishing, but I think when a lot of people who are not really involved in the industry or not hardcore gamers think about games, they're still thinking about those big AAA franchises that do tend to get put out by these companies I'm calling publishers, because you have to spend a lot of money to bring it to market, no different than a studio spends a lot of money on what's called P&A after the movie's done to really get it out there.
But a lot of that getting to market is a series of licenses and other rights clearances, and even things such as patents and other IP type issues. Is that a fair generalization for our legal market here?
Absolutely. There is no shortage of transactional matters and intellectual property matters that a practitioner in the space needs to address.
So, in my world as an entertainment lawyer, sometimes I'll be dealing with employment law, I'll be dealing with IP law, contract law, securities law, a handful of other areas. Kind of describe what your life is like, or what's kind of the typical issues and things that you deal with as a game industry attorney.
Well, I think it's fair to say, Kirk, there's nothing typical. That's for sure.
We both share that in common. That's great. Okay, go ahead.
And that's what makes the work interesting. You sit down at your computer with your to-do list, and if you hit one or two of those things by the end of the day, you're very lucky. I've actually seen in the past couple of years issues just related to not getting paid or slow payment. There was such a movement 3 years, 4 years ago into games that might have crypto functions within it, blockchain technology. And as that market has kind of imploded, so has the investment. So you are seeing a lot of work right now. And I don't get into this in detail, but no different than any other industry, a lot of work more for the financial attorneys, a lot of ABCs you're seeing, a lot of effort to get that next round of investment, which is interesting. I have had my independent practice for over 15 years, and I was always very proud of the fact that no contract I had ever worked on had ever wound up in litigation. And like Steph Curry's three-point record, that came to an end this past year,
Oh, wow.
but
Okay.
mainly because my clients weren't getting paid and had to do something about that.
It was a collection matter.
Collection matters, yes.
Yeah, and that happens. I mean, the one thing that struck me so much in your field, different than things that I come across in the entertainment side, is do you get into a lot of patent law and a lot of more sophisticated IP type issues? because people are trying to claim some sort of unique process or patentable item that prevents others in the game market from getting in, or was that just a phenomenon?
Well, I think historically, compared to other industries, video games were not as patent heavy. I think that changed, about 15 years ago as just the patent litigation area grew. You had a lot of the non-practicing entities jumping in. You had a lot of your multi-defendant cases. So patents started to grow, I think, more for defensive purposes and offensive purposes. Not to say there's not a number of unique elements within games for which many companies have patents. I think a lot of companies who didn't have huge programs 15 years ago changed that and have that now. I don't write patent applications and don't get into patents myself. I don't think many companies spend the time, effort, and money. Well, I know they don't have patent insurance for the most part and don't get into the hardcore forensic due diligence. Before they do a lot of the deals, you'll have your standard reps and warranties for, IP ownership and clear chain of title. But short of having really any kind of knowledge from whether getting a letter or knowing what's going on in the industry, I don't know how much deep a dive is really going on there.
And I think you hit a good point. When people ask me about being an entertainment attorney, I also try to explain to them that I am heavily involved in understanding the economics and the customs and traditions of the various aspects of the various entertainment industries. There is a difference between a lawyer looking at a publishing contract and going after all the wrong provisions because they don't really know what's customary, what's not, versus one that does. Tell me how that works in your industry. What sort of things do you need to know about the industry that if someone comes to me, for example, and they say, I've got a $10 million budget and I want to do a movie of the week, I'm going to know right off the bat they don't know what they're doing, just the economics and things like that. Is that similar in your world, or what kind of things do you keep in touch with in the industry that are really relevant in how you're advising your clients?
Well, it's definitely similar to music industry and what you do on the production side. A lot of good transactional attorneys who are just smart people can probably handle all these contracts for all these industries. But what you don't have is really that industry know-how. You don't have the familiarity with the vernacular and with the players involved, no pun intended. So I think in terms of, in the gaming space, what a lot of the independent video game attorneys bring to the table is familiarity with who all the players are, what the trends are in the industry. It is much a technology play as it is a content play. So knowing not just what the current technology is, but what is coming down the pipe makes you very, very effective.
Got it. And how do you keep up with that? Are you going to obviously? I know you're a big speaker on the continuing legal education market, but that's speaking to lawyers about legal issues. With respect to the industry itself, what do you do and how do you expose yourself ongoingly to that information? Obviously, knowing that you have worked for major companies and have a lot of that in your background already.
Yeah, there is no shortage of digests and knowledge online that you can read about. Finding the time to do it sometimes is a challenge, but to be honest, I learn a ton from my clients. I'm fortunate to have a number of independent developers that I've worked with for many years, and they are always trying to do the latest and the greatest. So we have discussions about, oh, should you move into this? Where is this going? Okay, I might know somebody who's investing in this area right now. Let me reach out to that person and let's have a discussion and see what they think. So a lot of it is just like almost any other industry. And unfortunately, it just means we're all getting older. But the longer you do the work, the more people you know. And, if you maintain a good relationship, usually people love talking to you because as we're doing right now, people are always really happy to tell other people about what they're doing. They always like to share what they know. And you'd be really surprised. I mean, you wouldn't personally, but I think to the audience, you'd be really surprised if you just reach out to people who might seem like they don't have time for anything and say, hey, I got a couple questions about this deal that I read you did last month. You'd be like, hey, no problem. I'd love to tell you about that as much as they can with confidentiality and whatnot.
And it is a business of relationships, no doubt. And I suspect the same in the gaming world. All right, just at a 50,000 foot level, I've got a game that I've created. I think it's very entertaining and people get addicted to it. And I come to you. What's kind of the process at a 50,000 foot level from where that game comes and I tell you about it and I have all the software and everything to actually getting it to the market? What are kind of the steps and what are some of the typical issues that will come into play when you're counseling me? And I know you said you represent a lot of publishers, but I suspect, you've got a lot of game developers as well.
Yeah, it's more independent game developers. I've actually tried to limit the amount of big companies I work with for conflict reasons because I
Ah,
really
okay.
enjoy more the startups and the smaller groups. And for a lot of those, I function as an outside general counsel. If you're working for a major company, they usually just need you for isolated deals, to be honest. So that's probably where more of the focus of my practice is. And to answer your question, the first question would be, all right, you've got this great game, Kirk. First off, is it a mobile game? You want to make this for consoles? Is this a PC game? What do you want to do with it? And then once we figure that out, then you can go step by step in terms of what do you have to get into place. If the game's going to be entirely original, that's easy. Sit down, start writing code, and get it made. Hopefully, you have a relationship with a company that can bring it to market, a publisher, because if it's just going to show up on the App Store as Kirk Schroder's new game, not a lot of people are going to find that. So even though, the app stores have kind of taken down a lot of the barriers of entry, what you've seen with the cost of user acquisitions going up is that to really have consumers find your game, you still need to have a name behind it. And that's why independent developers still like to work with publishers, why a lot of mobile publishers kind of have created these labels, so to speak. They'll sort of publish for somebody like Kirk in his game.
Am I licensing to the publisher or is the publisher taking it over from me?
You can do the deals either way, but in most instances, it would be a license.
Am I getting paid on a gross dollar at the publisher or a net? I'm just using some entertainment industry concepts to see how they relate in the gaming world.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is unlike your world, we do not have a 60-page net definition.
That makes me happy. Go ahead.
Yes, but the deals are usually a net profit or net receipt basis. So you would license your game to a publisher. That publisher would usually, other than adding their name, would bring a lot of expertise in terms of what they can do to leverage your game better. So a lot of companies now have data scientists and analytics experts who will go back and say, okay, if we tweak this, if we tweak that, you're going to reach more people. If we tweak this, you're going to have people play the game now for 45 minutes instead of for 15 minutes. And in the mobile market, where most games are either free or anywhere from 99 cents to maybe $4.99, most of the money is made through the in-app purchases and adding additional content and updates and features. So that amount of time you spend in the game becomes very valuable. So they'll add those features, they'll get the money. Apple or Google, at least for now, will take their 30% or their 30 cents on the dollar. The rest will go to the publisher. The publisher will normally deduct really just whatever costs it spent on development. In this model, they'll deduct those user acquisition costs and some marketing costs. You take into account there could be some returns for, some technical issues from time to time and taxes, and that's really about it.
And then what's the usual split between a game developer and a publisher then after that net or recoupment?
It really fluctuates depending on what the game is, who's behind the game, is the game pretty much already done or are we developing it together? It can be anywhere, when you say split, you're assuming a profit share, so we can work with that, but it could be anywhere from like 90-10 to 50-50.
Wow. Okay.
Certainly Apple and Google with their 30%, that seems to become a very consistent number. So 70-30, you do see a lot.
Got it. All right. Just shifting gears. Who makes up the video game market? I'm guessing it's just teens and older white men. Is that
No, not at all.
that's what people would say? Okay.
The market has become varied. I mean, I think one way, the easy way to look at it is, 30 years ago when you thought it was just teenagers and white men in their basement, all those people are now 50 and 60 years old, just like the baby boomers, and they're still playing games, right?
Okay.
So there's really no shortage. The Entertainment Software Association is the trade association that advocates on behalf of the video game industry. Their website breaks down these numbers by a lot of different demographics and amounts, but they're saying right now that over 200 million people in the United States alone play games regularly.
Wow. And then is that still primarily a youth market? Is it an older market? Is it a particular demographic?
So again, reading their website, 59% girls, 86% boys. These are the people who, that's the split in terms of who's asking for games for holiday gifts this year, as just an example. I think a recent survey, 1 in 3 adults say they plan to buy video games as a gift for themselves.
Wow.
And, parents enjoy playing the games both with their children, but as much on their own. So I would just encourage people, if they really want to do a deep dive into this, go to the Entertainment Software Association website. It's the ESA.com, and you can get a lowdown of pretty much everything you want to know.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the future and what time we have left. Obviously, AI. How's AI going to affect the video game market, or do you even know what that looks like yet?
Well, AI, it's a great subject, and this is what I recently moderated a panel at the Digital Media and Video Game Conference at University of California Law, used to be Hastings. That's also sponsored by the Bar Association's Forum on Sports and Entertainment Industries. And what people tend to forget with how popular now the term AI is, AI has been in video games as long as there's been video games. AI has always been the technology to drive what are called NPCs, or non-playable characters. So basically, your enjoyment of a game is driven quite a bit by what's going on in the whole environment around you, whether you're playing like a first-person shooter game or a strategy game. That has always been a facet of gaming, and that will continue. Now, certainly with what I think people today associate with the term AI, which is really providing information at the touch, the amount of sophistication in the games will just continue to grow by leaps and bounds. The reality factor will continue to grow by leaps and bounds. Hopefully it won't put attorneys like myself out of business, but I've already had clients who have said, "Oh, I got this agreement using AI. I just want to go with that."
Yeah, trust me, I'm still in a phase where people come to me with forms they get off the internet, and they generally have more problems than solutions. So hopefully, our judgment as lawyers will always have a value. You were talking about reality. What are the new reality platforms you see happening, and should I be scared?
I would not be scared, and I don't think they're new as opposed to still evolving. So, using virtual reality and the headsets that you see on the market, Meta's Quest, very popular. PlayStation still has their own, version of a VR headset. VR in gaming was being used 20 years ago, and it really just never took off because I think of the social disconnect with being with somebody with one of these on. But it still has its place in gaming, and I don't think that's going away. Sony certainly is making an investment in it still. They still are making games compatible with VR. Meta is spending money to make games compatible with VR. I think certainly from a commercial standpoint, the success has been more almost like a training tool. Companies like large industrial equipment companies use them in their HR training for safety factors. You're hearing more and more on the sports side about coaches using them as part of their training, doctors using them as part of their training. So I think that's a great example of a technology that's here, but where it is today and where it is tomorrow will change by leaps and bounds. I've seen ads for Ray-Ban sunglasses that have a very limited VR aspect in them. Apple has announced their own headset. They showed some drawings of it last year, but it's not to market yet, and that'll remain to be seen. Microsoft had its HoloLens, which has faded a little bit, but I think you'll still see that technology keep coming back.
What other trends are you seeing?
It's mobile. I mean, the amount of money going in and coming out of mobile is just incredible. Scopely, which is a game company that I think began in 2011, was bought last year by a game group backed by Saudi Arabia called Savvy Game Group. And that purchase was for $4.9 billion.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
Scopely is just a not just, but they're a publisher of mobile games. I think they have 8 or 9 games in their portfolio. One of their games, again, to put the numbers in order, Monopoly Go. So people in this audience should be familiar with the Hasbro Monopoly game. A license was given to Scopely to do a mobile version, and that game in 7 months generated over $1 billion in revenue. So, right, you do the numbers, over 100 million a month coming in to Scopely.
Wow. All right. So just in our closing time still, because I want to get some of these quick questions in. What's your advice to lawyers that want to practice in this area? Just generally, any things right off the top of your head that would be useful to them?
I think first and foremost, be a strong intellectual property transactional attorney. Understand licensing, understand ownership. Certainly, in almost any major publishing deal I work on, there's always a question and there's significant back and forth in the exchange of documents about ownership rights. You have a party that is going to own audiovisual elements. If a game's being made, though, by an external developer, they're coming with technology that already exists and they need to continue to own that. And then there's always the question, okay, but what about derivatives? What about elements that become uniquely associated with the game itself? So really understanding ownership, licensing, intellectual property, I think that's a great way to get started. And then like any other industry you want to be part of, then just start targeting networking opportunities.
Yeah, such as the programs that you chair, as well as some of the industry events. And I know the
Absolutely.
program has a non-lawyer audience in the entertainment field. So if someone is interested in gaming, besides my recommendation that they contact your digital arts law in San Francisco, what advice do you have for game developers that may be listening to this podcast?
If you're a startup independent game developer, try not to take shortcuts right away, because if you are in an opportunity to start doing deals with other parties, you're going to be making reps and warranties. You're going to be making promises that what you've done is yours. You're going to have to back that up. And then, what I've learned in the last few years, having some companies go through the M&A process, is you're going to have to prove all this again down the road if you're successful. So I really feel that even in those first deals, make sure your contracts really are buttoned up. There seems to be a tendency that, oh, if I have a contract that's more than 3 or 4 pages, I might scare away the other side.
Oh yeah, boy, frustrating when I hear that.
Yeah. And it's like there's no solution for not doing it right. And it's just going to cause you more work in the long run. It's going to cause you more legal bills in the long run, because you're going to be going back in time to try to fix things that were very easy to do right in the first place.
So true. I'm going to give you the last word. Any last thoughts or anything that would be the benefit for our listening audience?
Well, if it's somebody who is, still in law school or very early in their career, who is just looking to have a opportunity to work in the gaming space, as we said, target companies that you like. Don't be shy to reach out to people for informational interviews. If you're still in school, a lot of big companies still do internships and do them, but ultimately, just try to get the best job possible while you keep doing your networking. If you're already an experienced practitioner in the field, you probably know more than you think that applies to this space. I wish I could say it takes a rocket science, but it just takes, like anything else, a lot of time and effort and hard work and energy.
I'm so happy you were able to join us finally, Seth. And for our audience, again, Seth is just one of my favorite people and colleagues, and we go back a long way. He really is just top of his game in the video game industry, as well as what he does as a lawyer in his background. So if you do ever need help, he's at Digital Arts Law in San Francisco, and I know that he's always open and available to chat with people. Seth, thank you for being here. This is Kirk Schroder, and you've been listening to Brief Encounters, which is part of the DC Bar Communities podcast. And just want to thank everyone for listening, and be well and stay tuned for our next podcast.
Thank you, Kirk. It's been a pleasure.